Hello and welcome to another edition of Center Court Weekly. I'm Center Court and I'm joined by no one today. I got producer Tim Gardner in making this all happen. Frank Wolf had to call in today. Unfortunately, his son Michael's a little under the weather, so well wishes to you, Michael. I know you're home watching. We'll see how I do. I'm going to wing it solo. It's like Colin Cowherd style without J-Mac, except I'm no Colin Cowherd. But anyway, playoffs about to be in full swing in Western New York. They started last night. Monsignor Martin got underway at Villa Maria with a pair of pre-quarterfinals as the first two postseason victories of the season have happened. You got the Park School knocking off St. Francis behind a strong 21-7 third quarter. That's where the game got flipped around. The Pioneers punched their ticket to the quarterfinal round of the Manhattan Cup playoffs. And St. Mary's, for a third time, knocks off Cardinal O'Hara, and now they will earn themselves a third game with Nichols. That's going to be in the quarterfinals Sunday afternoon at Villa Maria. So Park earns a third date with Timon. St. Mary's earns a third date with Nichols. Both of those squads lost their first two meetings. We'll see if they can turn things around in the quarterfinals. No real surprise from my end about the results from last night, about what I expected. Tomorrow is the seeding meeting for Section 6. Not much to really decide in that meeting. I think everything is pretty much predetermined, but it's still a seeding meeting, not a traditional seeding process, more of a predetermined way it all goes based on league results. But that's tomorrow, so tomorrow all the brackets come up. You'll be able to see all that on the viewfromcentercourt.com. I will put it all on my X account tomorrow, so look for that. Bracket Central will be live as soon as it's available. I don't ever release anything before the section puts it out because that wouldn't be cool. Let's see. My week. Let's recap my week here real quick. So, last night, watched Randolph at Allegheny Limestone. That was a game that was supposed to happen earlier in the season. It got rescheduled to this week so that Allegheny Limestone could have the services of Carson Kwiatkowski back, who just became the school's all-time leading scorer. Still doesn't have 1,000. I was surprised to see that. He passed Sam Flanders to become the all-time leading scorer in Allegheny Limestone. So Allegheny Limestone has never had a 1,000-point score. That's going to change. Carson's going to get his 1K this year. I'm telling you, that's coming. He's very close, to my knowledge. I don't have the exact number, but I know he's on that verge, so I anticipate that to happen this year. More importantly, Allegheny Limestone picks up a big win last night, knocking off Randolph. Jumped up 6-0 early and really held on to the lead throughout the game. Randolph would get close, get within a point. I think they might have tied it up at one point. But credit to Allegheny Limestone. That's a team that started the season 8-0. And it's the second big win for them this week. They knocked off Holland earlier in the week at home. Then they come back to beat Randolph. So two of the very best teams in Section 6 Class C are wins for Allegheny Limestone. They participate in B2, but let's not get anything twisted. Holland and Randolph are quality teams that could compete in Class B2, so certainly no knock on the Class C competition. More of a credit to Allegheny Limestone for a big win. For Randolph, that's a loss at the end of the season that should have them pretty stirred up going into the postseason. It's going to be interesting. So Randolph is in line to play a semifinal game against Westfield. They are on the same side of the bracket when they get to JCC, should they both get there. I suspect they will both get there. We'll get more into that in a little bit. Wednesday night, NFL championship went down at Niagara Wheatfield High School. And at the end of the day, it was the Grand Island Vikings who came in with one loss on the season to the team that they had to defeat for the NFL championship, Kenmore West. Well, they did it. Grand Island wins the game, and it was a great game to be at. I thought it was a nice atmosphere, well-played game between two teams that both felt like they were the better team coming in. Uh, Credit to Grand Island. They played a style and they played a way that looked like a championship team. Jace Wilkie turned in a big game performance in that one. Zach Christian, once again, comes in and just is a spark for that team. What a blessing that he showed up at Grand Island this year, son of Canisius basketball coach. And that kid can just flat shoot, but he's got a great feel for the game. The shot comes off quick. The Vikings are just there's so much to like about that team this year when you watch them. And we're going to get more into Grand Island in a little bit because I want to address something I had to get into with the comments. But props to them. It's their first league title since 1979. And I've been tough on them, and I will be again about non-league schedule this year. But at the end of the day, when I saw Grand Island play, they look different this year. They look like a team that has a legitimate shot at winning a Section 6 championship. Legitimate shot. It's a very tough bracket that they're in, but I like Grand Island a lot. For Kenmore West, they were missing one of their players. One of their players was unable to go, and that was unfortunate. It was one of their starters. Still a great effort from Kenmore West in that one, and I think it's an interesting road coming up for Kenmore West, too, in the playoffs that we'll get to. Tuesday night, CENTERCOURT game of the week was live in Cheektowaga, and that was a fun game, too. So Panama, the sports writers' #1 team, New York State basketball's #2 ranked team in New York State Class D, makes the trip up to Cheektowaga for a 5 o'clock game during February break. I walked into the gym, very much reminded me of the COVID era. There was a mostly empty gym. There was no energy in the gym. I thought, man, I feel like someone should have taken my temperature and told me I needed to be in a mask when I walked in, but I'm quite glad that was not the case. I was definitely a mask cheater, below my nose a lot. Anyhow, Panama, they are just good. I mean, Cheektowaga is a good team. We know Cheektowaga is a good team. They won ECIC 3 again this year. That's 2 years in a row they've won that league. Senior-laden squad that starts freshman J.J. Shanklin, who is awesome, but 4 seniors. But they took on a team that starts 5 seniors and a team with some championship swagger. A team that is about the most solid lock you're going to have this year to win a sectional title. Panama will win Class D. There's no doubt about that locally. Their sights are set on winning a regional against Fillmore, also very highly ranked in the state and beyond. This looks like a state championship Panama team to me. However, getting past Fillmore, no sure deal. So I sat there with Ryan Mountain, who got to see them earlier in the season as well. We watch him again. Just everything that they do, Panama, it's so in sync. It's so together. This is a group of athletes and winners that have come up doing things the right way, playing together, taking their lumps. They were all on the court together as freshmen. They've just come right through and added pieces along the way. They have size. They have a standout player in Carter Brink, a pair of 1,000-point scorers. They process everything so quickly, offer rebounds. They are leaking. They are looking for the leak. They are spacing the floor, and they are attacking the basket, kicking the corners, knocking down shots. It was a well-played game both ways. At the end of the day, you got to tip your cap to Panama and winning that game. Monday, got to watch 3 games. Saw Orchard Park go to Grand Island, a quality non-league game. Again, probably missing a lot of atmosphere on a February break game. But another chance for Grand Island to pick up a win against a top 10 team. It was their second of the year. They knocked off Lockport earlier in the season at Lockport. And then on Monday afternoon, Orchard Park comes in. They take the Quakers down. They led the game throughout, got up early, never trailed in that game. Big win there for Grand Island 2 days before they would claim that NFL championship. Timon went down to Jamestown. That was the game that I thought could be a first to 100, don't even keep score. Was really excited to watch that game. At the end of the day, I don't think Timon ever trailed either. Timon was just better that day. Nakai Harris looked like the best player in that game. Timon showed off a little more depth, and they picked up a quality win heading into the playoffs, for sure. And then the other game that I got to see that night was St. Mary's at Akron, another reschedule. So St. Mary's takes the trip to Akron on Monday night, and an interesting matchup, public-private. You've got a B1 in Akron who hasn't played a crazy schedule this year. They don't have the strongest league, but they came into the CENTERCOURT Classic, put it on St. Francis, had a really nice showing there, picked up an overtime win earlier in the season against Buffalo Sciences. So there was plenty to like about this Akron team already, and you could watch and just, they pass the eye test when you watch them. On Monday night, they just laid a beating to St. Mary's, and it's you could call it an indictment on St. Mary's for the way that they played that game, which I will in some regard, but it looks like they bounced back nicely against O'Hara. But as much as an indictment on St. Mary's, I would say it is a props to Akron in the way they played that game, much like the way they approached the CENTERCOURT Classic game a couple weeks ago in that win over St. Francis. But I think it's a good game for St. Mary's to come in because that's a reminder to their players that you might think that you're a more talented team. You might think, well, it's a small school. Whatever you think coming into that game, when you go to Akron, you get outplayed like that. That's a moment to look in the locker room and reflect and say, I think we need to be better defensively. I think we need to be a little tougher. I think we need to recognize pick and rolls, and I'm sure that that's something that they're talking about over there. And for Akron, we hear a lot about the Gerstungs, and I think by now you've heard a lot about Darren Brooks. So I got to go back. So the Gerstungs, Blake Gerstung, CENTERCOURT Classic game MVP, came out and knocked down 7 3-pointers. Ben Gerstung, probably regarded as the team's best player, coach's son, shoots the three. He's got size. He can get up and finish at the rim. Great all-around player for Akron. Darren Brooks, the sophomore big man. He's got some rare size that not a lot of kids have. A broader body with good footwork, soft hands, very intelligent basketball player. Plays the game at his speed. Very effective defensively. And then there's Braden Lamont. Holy smokes, Braden Lamont. That's the kind of kid who probably doesn't earn the accolade at the end of the season of an all-CENTERCOURT top 60. It's a tough decision when they're talking about all-league teams, and I want to touch on all-league later. But Braden Lamont is just a classic high school basketball point guard. Love the way he plays the game. Love the way he pushes the tempo. Lefty. Tough kid. Sees things. Understated performance all the time. Head down. Lunch bucket player. Makes everybody around him better. They had a nice point guard last year, Trace Hill, who was a senior. And it was, we got a lot to do to replace Trace. They did, and they did it admirably. And Braden Lamont definitely deserves a big shout-out for his performance in that game and his performance overall this season. So credit to Akron for picking up their 2-0 this year against the Monsignor Martin. So nice job, Akron. You got one loss on the season. That's a school record for them. They finished the regular season 19-1, most wins they've ever piled up in a regular season. Their overall record for wins in a season is 20. They'll hopefully pick that up in a quarterfinal game. That's the goal, to get to Buff State and beyond. Akron thinks they got that championship swagger, looking to claim their first title since, I believe, 2010, when they beat a pretty good Wilson team. So we'll take a break here. We'll come back in about 60 seconds. We'll get into some new stuff. You are watching CENTERCOURT Weekly. This show is made possible by the sponsorship of Empire Electric. And I'm sure Tim Gardner's got some other ones I should mention. I know Empire Electric. I don't have it all in front of me, but Oh, Binghamton, yes. Binghamton College. Damon. Damon number 1 in the country, Division II, Damon. Logistics Plus. Did I mention Umpire Electric? Dan Cha-Cha Attorney. Thank you, Producer Tim. And, of course, Umpire Electric. We'll be right back.
Need an electrician? Empire Electric is your residential wiring specialist. New builds, service upgrades, lighting, generators, you name it, Empire does it with hundreds of 5-star reviews that speak for themselves. Call Empire Electric today for your free estimate.
Buffalo Breathe Now, Western New York's newest respiratory urgent care and walk-in clinic, located at 6161 Transit Road in East Amherst, New York. Open 7 days a week. Visit buffalobreathenow.com or call 716-320-0180. Find us on Facebook and Instagram, buffalobreathenow.com.
Seek your next adventure. Make your next memory. Explore your next connection. What will you do next?
We're back. CENTERCOURT Weekly, solo edition. No Frank Wolf, just me today. Michael Wolf, under the weather. Frank, being a good dad, staying home, keeping him comfortable. Producer Tim still came in to make this possible for us today. I showed up, had to scramble and just think, well, what am I going to say then? Normally I'm just reacting to Frank. Today I had to actually think about what I was going to talk about. So that was interesting. What I noticed today when that was going on was my phone never stops pinging, ever. So you'd write down one thing, what? Yeah, all day long. It just doesn't quit. Between family, friends, basketball, life, cell phones. They're interesting. Couple 1,000-point scores from last night. Frank Wolf found himself at Cheektowaga Lake at Dunkirk last night, and that was a jackpot game because 2,000-point scores last night. Happy 1K to Greg Orcutt from Dunkirk and also Nick Jacobson from Cheektowaga Lake. Both of those young men grabbed their 1,000-point ball, and I didn't see anything on X about it, so we're talking about it here. Congratulations to both of them. Another fine performance from last night was Eden's win over Lakeshore. That is a Class A squad coming in to take on B2 Eden. Decent Lakeshore team. They've done pretty decent for themselves in ECIC2. I consider Eden to be a pretty highly regarded small school this year. They were a sectional finalist last season against Falconer. Kobijenko, 27 points in that game, in that victory, and notable, Eden won that game without Chris Krenzik, who's got to be averaging mid-20s anyway for that team. So Eden's a team they've been nicked up at times this year. They were missing Tyler Wakelam for a little bit. They were missing Chris last night. They haven't always had all their moving parts together, but that is a tough team that has continued to win without Tayson Slatting, and a team that I think you will see at Buff State again this year in Class B2, and a team that absolutely is part of a crowded room in B2 of potential championship teams. So I'm on my site this week, and I noticed I got a new comment. And I don't get a lot of comments anymore. I used to get a lot of comments on there. We don't get comments like we used to. You know, ebbs and flows of time and how people interact, and maybe they go to Twitter more, maybe they just don't look at things anymore or think to leave comments. But I got one from a gentleman named Bob Johnson, and Bob asked me, where is Grand Island in your large school rankings? 16-1 with wins over Lockport and OP, but not ranked, ? Please explain, ? So I took the time to reply to Bob because I thought it's a valid question from him. And I make rankings. How does a team that had one loss and had that win over Lockport and then the win that I had mentioned earlier in the week over Orchard Park, how did they find themselves not in the rankings? So I took the time to give a thorough answer and right, wrong, or indifferent, this is my thinking on stuff, and I was glad to have the opportunity to maybe take you through my thought process on things. So, started from the beginning and said the first time I watched Grand Island this year was that win over North Tonawanda in the Cataract Classic. I think they won the game by 42 points, and at the time, my takeaway was this Grand Island team is really good. They can still play. They're playing a different style this year without the big man who graduated last year, but I really liked Grand Island. I also left not thinking much of Williamsville North, and the Spartans actually have done quite a bit to change my thinking on them this year. They've improved significantly, and I think that game would probably go a little differently if they had a rematch. I still think the result favors Grand Island, probably not by 42 points, though. But so they got that win at the CENTERCOURT Classic. They made an appearance, or at the Cataract Classic, excuse me. They made an appearance in my rankings on December 15th, and I had Grand Island ranked number 10. And they remained ranked by me all the way into January when they went into that game against Lockport. They had climbed up to number 8 when they were going into that game against Lockport, which they won, by the way. And I don't believe that they were ranked by the Buffalo News at the time, but they were by me. They go into this game against Lockport, and they pick up a 3-point win in the Lions' Den. And that was when I moved Grand Island up even farther. They were the highest-ranked Class A team in Western New York at the time. I had them ahead of Lockport, who they had just beat, ahead of Williamsville South, ahead of Amherst, and off we went. It was really the only win of substance you could point to for Grand Island at the time, but it was still one that should have been respected. So then in the final week of January, Grand Island plays the second game that you could really look at for rankings purposes, and that was at Ken West. And I remember when I wrote the rankings bit that week, I had said they got an interesting, tough test coming up this week at Ken West. They didn't pass that test. I believe they lost by 7 points in their visit to Kenmore West. Kenmore West at the time I had just watched lose a big game to Williamsville East. They lost by 21 points. Excuse me. They hadn't just lost to. They had lost 2-9. Okay, they did. They had lost by 21 points. Sorry to be all over the place. They lost by 21 to Williamsville East, and then a couple days later, they hosted Orchard Park, who also came in and beat them. So now I've got 2 results to look at for Grand Island, and I'm saying, well, you just lost to Ken West. The thing that I never mentioned before anyone kind of asked me to mention it was that when Grand Island beat Lockport in Lockport, Mike Griffin had to come out of that game in the second quarter and was unable to return. If you've watched Lockport basketball this year and you're familiar with that team, Mike's a kid who's averaging over 16 points a game. He's a player for Lockport, and he's a significant piece. Lockport's not a deep team. Mike Griffin's an important part of it. You took him out, it affected what Lockport was able to do, and it would affect any team that relies heavily on 5 starters to be missing one. But it's also, those things happen, so I try not to ever qualify somebody's win or loss based on one player that was in or out of the game. However, it became kind of relevant to color in at some point when I dropped him out of the rankings. So it was ultimately, Grand Island didn't have a great non-league schedule to point to where you could say, well, they've also got this win and that win. And Lockport, conversely, was scheduling Jamestown, Rush Henrietta, Nichols, Williamsville East, maybe some better opponents than the likes of Buffalo Arts. Who else did they play? Tonawanda, Maritime. Those are 2 teams that haven't won a game. So those were some wins this year for Grand Island. So at the end of the day, you've got a good win over Lockport, a loss to Ken West, who wasn't ranked, and so you brought them back out behind Orchard Park. Ultimately, there just wasn't room, and they fell out of the rankings. Then this week, they avenged that loss to Kenmore West, and they looked great doing it, and that could change things when I do rankings, especially considering they also just picked up that win against Orchard Park this week. So rankings just come out once a week. There's always a lot of thought put into it, and I'm never saying that I'm right. on how I do things, but they were 14-1 with a win over Lockport and a loss to Ken West at the time when I had them out of the rankings. They're now 16-1 with a split with Ken West and a win over Lockport and Orchard Park. That might change my way of thinking on that whole situation. We'll find out when I put out rankings on Sunday night. Another interesting question comes up as it pertains to Grand Island or really any team, but all league selections are about to come out. We just got through league play, and then that's when the coaches go to their league meeting at the end of the year, and they have votes on all league, and the all league selections are put out. And all league is based on your league games. We all played each other, presumably twice, or we all played each other once, and however they cross it over. But then they sit down and the coaches all place a vote, and that's how it works. All league selections. If you really understand the process, it could be a little bit of a political room. And I know it to be just from knowing and talking to the coaches over the years and understanding conversations that go on in that room. You know, it's sometimes you've got a stronger voice in the room. Sometimes the league chair had a really good year, or the team that was in first place did it with a lot of balance, but there might be a couple of elite players in second or third place in that league, and it's, you know, how do you really decide on that? So it ultimately comes down to a vote. Some coaches are friends with each other. Some coaches don't like each other within a league, and I'm not voting for his player or whatever. So that's where it can become a little bit of a political room. But where I want to tie it into Grand Island is, it made me think about, okay, so now that NFL play has wrapped up, last year's NFL Player of the Year was Charlie Croft. Is Charlie Croft the League Player of the Year this year? And it's an interesting question. Last year, I think he was. Luke Walk would have been the number 2 pick for me, but I think that Charlie did enough to earn that with the head-to-head victory over them. But then looking at it this year, you got Jace Wilkie, who is the league champion for Grand Island, enjoyed a fine season. Harlan Brannon, who was the league finalist for Ken West, Ken West with a split with Lockport, and Charlie Croft. I mean, there's 3 really good players from that league. So who gets league MVP? Who's the player of the year in the NFL? I don't know, but I think Wilkie certainly has a case for it at this point. With because I don't see a ton of separation between those players just in what they did in league play. Lockport now with 2 league losses. It's an interesting debate, and I don't think that all league selections ever need to be tied into what goes on at the end of the year, which has been suggested to me in the past. That, you know, I've had people be upset with me in the past over the all-CENTERCOURT team coming out at the end of the year, and the all-league teams were already out, and my all-CENTERCOURT team doesn't reflect, well, this guy was player of the year in our league, and when all-CENTERCOURT comes out, this player is actually ranked on a higher team. And I say, well, all league is based on your games, your all-league games. That's what I've already covered, the political room on how you get to that process. All-CENTERCOURT is me. That's me. That's it. I'm not soliciting everybody's opinion and weighing this or that other people feel like I should feel. It's what I feel. I've been to a lot of games. I've taken in a lot of sample size. I watch a lot of streams. I put a lot of thought into this, weigh a lot of things into it. I always say winning plays a big part of it. But at the end of the day, you can't say, well, the coaches voted this guy, so I've got to follow what the coaches did. Sometimes all league makes perfect sense to you. Sometimes it doesn't. But that is my general take on all league. Let's talk about seeding. Another interesting one. Seeding process. We're a little different than most places in New York State, in that our seeding process out here strictly adheres to league play. So it's only based on how you do within your own league. You pick up 5 points for beating a team in your league of the same class, 6 points for beating somebody of a higher class, and 4 points for beating someone of a lower class. I think it's about that simple at this point, and then they divide your total number of points you collected by the number of league games you played, and there's your PowerPoint, and off we go. So That's how we do it. So that's how you come up with scenarios like Westfield playing Randolph potentially in a semifinal at JCC instead of a final, when conventional wisdom would say we all think Randolph and Westfield deserve to be considered the top two teams in Class C and in line to meet in a championship when brackets come out. That won't be the case. Another one that appears like they could be on a collision course to meet at Buff State in the semifinal round would be Williamsville South and Amherst. That's another interesting debate. That one I'm fine with because Grand Island just won the NFL title, and I think they've got as much of a right as anybody to be that number one seed and be in line for that. And I've got no problem with two teams in the same league maybe having to play that rubber match to decide who's going to the sectional final. I don't think it's any lock that Amherst and South should have been in opposite brackets so they would have a chance to meet in the final. But it's always an interesting scenario with the seedings and how it comes out. As far as I understand it, other sections, the majority of other sections in the state follow more of a broad, we're going to count all of your games. And that is going to ultimately reward teams that schedule tougher competition or higher classifications, but it takes everything into account, just not your league games. They're both interesting. I think I'd prefer if we did it not the way that we do it, but we do it the way we do it, and that's what I'm used to. I would love to seed the teams, or I would love to be part of a committee that seeds it where, everybody goes in, and at the end of the day, you kind of put down, this is what I think it should look like, and it turns into an aggregate of what is all added up. But I think if you've got any kind of a horse in the race, you shouldn't be part of a seeding committee. But I don't understand exactly how the NCAAs do their seeding, but I think it's more of a committee like I'm suggesting. I put in my random smatterings in one of my editions that if I was seeding just for Class A2, for example, and I threw up what the bracket would look like, yeah, it would be a very interesting task if you could just hand seed the teams and go with what made the most sense, but that's not the way we do it. Certainly would be fun, though. Anyway, something to consider for the future. A way to change the seedings around. We're going to take another break. We'll come back and get through another segment. Could be our final segment, and then I'll be off to Curry's for my weekly fish fry. You're watching Center Court Weekly, brought to you by all of our great sponsors. Thank you.
Logistics Plus is a global transportation provider headquartered in Erie, PA, with locations worldwide, including right here in Western New York. Logistics Plus is consistently recognized as a fast-growing transportation and logistics company, great supply chain partner, top freight broker, leading project cargo manager, and a great place to work. With a strong passion for excellence, our 500-plus employees put the plus in logistics.
Or an efficient, personal approach for all of your transportation needs. More information about our Buffalo office is available at logisticsplus.com/Buffalo.
Just results.
Your life can change in an instant after an injury. You need a trusted partner at your side. Hi, I'm Dan Chacha. At Dan Chacha Injury Attorneys, we're here to help you navigate the challenges you'll face. Our dedicated team fights tirelessly for your rights, ensuring you get the compensation you deserve. Don't worry, Chacha's got you. Call Dan Chacha Injury Attorneys today for a free consultation. Your injury is our priority.
Call 648-3030. Just results.
We're back. Center Court Weekly, brought to you by Empire Electric, Binghamton College, Damon College, Logistics Plus, Cha-Cha Attorneys, Empire Electric. Did I cover everybody? Nailed it. All right. Week from today, Section 6 quarterfinals. Tip. Postseason's already underway. Monsignor Martin got us started last night. I like the way the Monsignor Martin has switched over to the new Manhattan Cup playoff format from what it started at years ago when it was just number 1 played number 8. So it would have started with Canisius taking on Cardinal O'Hara. I think it's better the way we do it now because it keeps the small schools alive a little longer. It lets them settle their own process as to who's going to go off and do the state. And I think there has to be a reward for that regular season too. It's, if you're all in the same league and you're playing and we get to the playoffs and we say, well, everyone makes the playoffs and we're just starting it right back from scratch. So Canisius, you go play O'Hara St. Joe's, you go play O'Hara, and Canisius, you go play St. Francis. And I don't think it needs to go that way. I like the way we do it now. It's a better way. It's very similar to how the section does it, where you start with a first round or pre-quarterfinals. It rewards the teams that really deserve to get a bye for a couple games, a pass to the semifinals or quarterfinals, and so that's how they're doing it. But quarterfinals next Friday night, and if you're looking at everything like I am in advance, you're projecting what you see could be a couple good ones. So there's a pre-quarterfinal in Class AA2 between Niagara Wheatfield and Starpoint. Starpoint's a team that is interesting. They play in a very solid league, ECIC2. They were a team that was supposed to come back into the season with 4 seniors that played a lot of basketball together, and they ended up entering the season with 3 seniors that played a lot of basketball together. I'm talking about Cohen Vogel, Jackson Griesmer, Ben Olson, and, of course, Jack Kemp, the big man who tore his ACL in the offseason. Jack's back. And Jack just came back after the CENTERCOURT Classic. He wasn't able to play in that. That Classic was February 1st that Starpoint was in. Well, he's back now, and Starpoint's been winning since he got back. And he changes things for the team. Starpoint picked up a win over Williamsville South with Jack Kemp. So I'm going to favor Starpoint in that game against Niagara Wheatfield. Certainly not impossible for Mr. Becker, the 7th grade sensation at Niagara Wheatfield, to pull off the upset. But I'll favor Starpoint in that game. Starpoint can win that game. They got to go to Health Sciences and play Health Sciences at Villa on a Friday night quarterfinal. That's a fascinating game. Lucas Vogel can coach. We get that game. I think that's a game that comes into the 4th quarter, and we'll see what happens. But Starpoint believes in themselves right now. They've got pieces. It's not Health Sciences' best team I've ever seen, but it's still Health Sciences, and they can still play. That's an interesting potential quarterfinal. Another interesting one would be Williamsville East taking on Kenmore West. And that's actually a quarterfinal that we are going to see. I don't even need to think too much about it. It's going to happen. Williamsville East at Kenmore West. Now, that's a game that I've referenced from earlier. They've played once this year. Williamsville East beat them down by 21 points. Big second half. I don't think that there's any guarantee or really any chance that we see that same result again. I think it's going to be a different game in Ken West. Don't know which way it goes, but it's a fascinating one. I think that's probably where I'm going to be taking myself to for quarterfinal Friday. Williamsville East, Ken West, Part 2, for the right to get to Buff State. Man, that Class AA2 bracket is just so good. Starpoint went into Health Sciences and won. That would be an 8 seed going into a 1 seed and knocking them off. That's a rare thing. That reminds me of Dikembe Mutombo Denver Nuggets style upset from early NBA days. Also reminds me of Iroquois as an 8 seed going in and knocking off Mark Kenzie and a good Maryvale squad. Iroquois ends up at Buff State with an 8-1 win. So it's not unheard of. It's a little uncommon for sure. It's rare that the 8th seed is good enough to beat the 1 seed, but it could happen with our wacky seeding process. On Saturday, you get more quarterfinals. That's when you get into the Class B and C quarterfinals. There's some interesting ones that set up potentially like Yale Cup 2 teams against CCAA 1 West teams. Now, what does that mean, everybody? Well, Yale Cup 2 teams like MST and Middle College, Olmsted, those kind of teams. CCAA 1 West teams like, well, that league is Dunkirk, Olean, Salamanca, Fredonia, Southwestern, Allegheny Limestone, those teams. So we could have the potential for a Fredonia Middle College quarterfinal. You have the potential for Allegheny Limestone MST quarterfinal. A couple of neat ones. Southwestern, Akron. Southwestern coming up to Akron in the Niagara Orleans League. That's an interesting one. Southwestern, recent win at Fredonia. Really like this Akron team a lot. Haven't seen Southwestern yet this year, but they're definitely battle-tested from the league they play in. And then there's a great one in the southern tier that's lining up between Falconer and Salamanca, which would be another one to keep your eyes on, most notably because Falconer just went and won at Salamanca last week. So there's some cool quarterfinals coming up, and there's a little drama ahead of who ends up at Buff State, because there's going to be some teams that are left home not at Buff State, and there's going to be some teams that punch their ticket and earn their place to be there. This year, unfortunately, I figured it out. I know I have been kind of dangling that I was going to miss some basketball this year because my daughter is in this musical, and so I've decided to go to opening night, her opening night performance. So I will be missing Friday night. So there will be no JCC Friday for me this year other than streams. There will be no Buff State Championship Friday for me this season other than streams. I have made the decision to go and watch her on opening night and be all in for Championship Saturday. So tough, but you got to be there for your kid, and she deserves my support, and it's just basketball. I've seen plenty of it. I'll see it again. We'll watch some streams. But if you don't see me there, that's why. That's why. It's just because I love my daughter, and I had to make that decision. Lots of classes right now. Like there's decisions to make regardless. So I'd be missing basketball either way. So on Friday night, you could say I want to go to JCC and watch Class C and Class D, or you could say it's Friday night, I want to be at Buff State and watch 2 games there. I don't like making those decisions. I think if we had less classes, maybe we wouldn't have to make those decisions. There would just be a JCC Friday and then 5 games on a Saturday. This state edition of Class AAA has kind of forced that hand of it and added the 6th classification and watered it down, and then AA got split. So would not be opposed to seeing us find a way to just whittle it back down to 5 classes somehow. Maybe not split every AA, A, B. It's almost too many splits. You know, it's nice to have champions at the end of the year, but it can also get to be a little watered down when there's how many sectional champions, and then how many are actually playing in Rochester? Are those the real sectional champions? Interesting debate. I'm all for more basketball, but at the end of the day, I don't like when there's so much basketball, you have to make choices about which basketball you're going to watch. It might be too much basketball. I am a traditionalist, and I came through knowing Buff State to be one way. Buff State Week, the famous Buff State Week. It started small, it ended big. And what I mean by that is it started small on Monday night. Here come the Class B2s. And after them, we're going to watch the Class B1s. And it just kept building. And the A2s play later in the week. The A1s would play on Wednesday night. By Thursday night, you were watching your AAs. And then on Saturday, that same format started over, and the B2s played first at noon. And it built right up until your AA championship on a Saturday night. And that seemed to be the way it should go. And Saturday night ended with the Falls and the band, and it was awesome. And we got away from that, and now started alternating who was going to play on Monday night and how all that was going to go. Eventually, the AA game or the AAA game now, that got moved to a Saturday afternoon instead of Saturday night. And so there's been change within that. Not crazy about the change. Like the tradition of it. Like to just go small to large and let it build up that way and say, well, yeah, I know you had to play first on Monday. You're B2. Everyone, you know, and hey, we only had one night to prepare. So did the other team. So AA plays Thursday night. AA gets the late game Saturday. You get all day Saturday. Yeah, B2, they played Monday night, so they get this many days to prepare. Yeah, but you got to go play a noon game. You know, it's all, there's pros and cons to it, but I don't think I don't think it would make any sense to say we'll have the B2 game as the Saturday night headliner, and we'll start off Buff State Saturday with the AAA game or the AA game. You wouldn't want to do it that way either. So I would love to see us just go back to the tradition of it. I would like to know, just coming into a season, this is when your games are, and be able to promote it and be excited about it all the way through. So, yeah, I'm a traditionalist. I wanna see it be start small, end big. Friday night at JCC, Saturday at Buff State, maybe a little less classifications. Yeah, all right. Let me get on track here. A couple more things I wanted to touch on, and then we'll go to your questions, and we'll call it a show, because this is way harder to do by yourself than with Frank Wolf making me giggle and throwing me off track with random stuff along the way. I was talking about student sections with someone on the way up here today, and just want to say there was nothing more awesome than when I started doing this years ago, and student sections were loud, they were large, they were boisterous, they were cutting edge with some of the stuff they were coming up with, and they were getting in everybody's heads, and they did a great job of it. And unfortunately, you've seen the student sections get smaller and smaller, less consistent in their showings. COVID seemed to really nix that. Now we've got live streams. And there's nothing like high school basketball atmosphere. There's nothing like good student sections. We'll see a few good ones in the postseason, but we've been largely lacking them all season, and I miss it. I missed it when players got ridden during games, and then it became, well, you're hurting their feelings, or it's not fair, or whatever. You want my opinion on this? At the end of the day, it shouldn't be vulgar in high school, so student sections shouldn't be cursing at the other team. It doesn't need to get personal where you're talking about anybody's mother or anybody's family. It's certainly, there's no place for anything racial from a student section ever, or really just anywhere. Like, grow up and keep that out of your mouth. But other than that, toughen up. It's a student section riding you. It's putting some juice on the game. It was great when they knew a little something about the other team's best player and they used it against them. There was a player once that put online that he got a Division I scholarship and he was going somewhere, and that was all a hoax. It was a ruse, and everybody knew it. And so did the other teams that they played. And their student sections knew it, and they beat the kid up good for it. He had it coming, and it made the games more fun. Student sections were really clever back in the day. I would love to see them get big again, come back again, and have local administration say, you know what? Their kids, let them have some fun, as long as it doesn't get too inappropriate. I mean, I watched a Wilson Newfane game once, and this is back 15 years ago at least, maybe more, and two big crowds, and they obviously know each other very well, know the kids from each school very well, and so one of the players is in the musical at Wilson, and they're chanting High School Musical while he's inbounding the ball, and Wilson's losing the game, and Newfane's chanting, "Start your sailboats." Wilson at one point was chanting back to Newfane, "Read a book," because Wilson was considered a more intelligent district, I guess, by Wilson anyway. It was all clever stuff. It was a lot of fun. The Blue Zone going against whatever the Lakeman fans called themselves in the day. We need more student sections back. One other thing I was talking about was how my seat at the scorers table, my seat on the stage at Timon, when you're front access, sometimes you hear some really interesting stuff between the coaches, between players, between referees. Some of my favorite moments are the ones where I feel so awkward at what I'm hearing, or it's getting so confrontational or so heated. There's such a heated exchange that I am like, keep my head down. Don't keep your eyes down. Don't act too tuned into this. You can hear it all, but it's none of your business. Stay out of it. Enjoy the show. Don't talk about it. I see a lot of good things from my perch at CENTERCOURT, especially when I'm on the other side at the scorers table. Obviously, you don't ever see me come out in any public forums talking about it, and it's just part of the game anyway, but it's a fun access that I have in that way. So before I came on this show today, I dropped me some questions before I go on this show, and I may just answer them. So I see 3 of them, and so let's address these 3 questions right now before we get everybody out of here. With this being the worst St. Francis season in at least 10 years, what does the program need to do to become relevant and competitive again? Well, that's an interesting question. What do they need to do to become relevant and competitive again? So, worst season in at least 10 years. I guess I would agree with that to a degree. It could have just been a down year at St. Francis. It's not like we go back 5 years, they were on the verge of a Manhattan Cup final and lost on a technical foul situation with a player stepping on the court or not, and it was a dicey one. 17, they were in the Manhattan Cup final. It's the same coach, from that time. I don't know what goes on or what I would say about what they need to be better. I certainly don't think that St. Francis was a loaded roster this year of talent. It could be recruiting, but St. Francis is a bit of a football school. We know that they're very strong in football. Obviously, Canisius is too, and it's reflective in their basketball program. But that's a tough one. For what I do, I'm here to maybe give a little more positive promotion or whatnot. It's not my job to figure out what St. Francis needs to do to be better for next year to rebound from what this person's considering to be maybe their worst season in the last 10. It's going to happen at some point, right? Out of 10 years, there's going to be a season you point to and say that was our worst one. It was a down year at St. Francis this year. I think they can expect to rebound. Start by looking in the locker room, get hungry, play hard, get some talent in there. Good luck to the Red Raiders. Player of the Year candidates, ? Basketball 100. All right. I am going to tell you with this one, I'm going to kind of take a cop-out on this in 2 ways. It was one of the things I wrote down I could talk about, but I never really decided to get into it. And that is just that when people ask me throughout the year about who's going to be first team, who's this? Do you think this guy's a top 25 kid? Who's your player of the year? Who's the leading player of the year candidate right now? I think you get way too early in conversations for stuff and not just let stuff play out. And if you're starting to predetermine that this guy, because a lot of times you're watching a guy and you're like, oh, he's got to be at least a third teamer. Well, does he? Have you put the names on paper yet? Has the season ended? Did he win anything? There's so much to consider when you're doing this. And if you try and cement people into positions too soon, it just doesn't work. And most people have some kind of vested interest in why they think a player should land where he does. And the one thing I always say is I have relationships with everybody. I know everybody. All the coaches can get a hold of me. I know a lot of players. You meet parents and friends and everything. At the end of the day, when I make the decisions, it's honestly a representation of what I think and my best shot at saying, here's how to represent the high school basketball season as a whole when I put it all out. It's never personal, and it's one person's opinion. I think it's a large sample size of opinion that I provide. But so who's the player of the year this year? I don't know. We still have to find that out. It's certainly not determined. I would say that there's 7 kids that would have a shot at it. I'm not going to go through the list of 7. I think you could almost figure out that list of 7. But think about it. You think about it in your heads. If I was talking about 7 kids that all have a legitimate shot at winning player of the year this year, I think I can come up with 7. And I think that a lot will go down in the next couple weeks that will start to make some of that seem to come clear. And this is one of those years where I don't know how clear it's going to be even when all the dust settles. There's going to be a lot of debate about whatever I pick at the end of the year anyway, because those 7 kids are all really good. One of them is going to end up on second team because you've got a player of the year, 5 first teamers, and I'm talking about 7 kids. So a player of the year and 5 first teamers, someone falls to second team this year. That's just the way it goes. That's still no slight on whoever isn't on first team that, oh, you were only second team. it's still an honor. Just look at it a different way. I was a top 10 player in Western New York this year, but at least I make those tough calls, not like the all-league teams when there's co-MVPs and co-players of the year and 6 kids on first team along with 2 players of the year and all that. Like, make the tough decision, you know. Not everybody needs a trophy every minute. Last question. Reaction to Panama boys win over Cheektowaga, and then Jamestown, Olean, Salamanca, Randolph, Westfield, Panama. Is there a reason to explain why the southern area of section has been so successful compared to the Buffalo region? Well, they certainly were last year. They piled up sectional championships, and it was something I talked about in my preview. Southern tier basketball is college style, very defensive, lots of ball movement. When I watched Randolph and Allegheny Limestone last night, there was a point where I told my daughter, just watch how the ball moves right now. Just watch how they get that ball moving to create a shot for somebody. I think that would probably be the best answer I could give you. Is basketball is a team sport. Maybe the same reason that you would see in college basketball with transfer portals and such, a team that keeps a group together, a team that's senior laden. Southern tier, there's talent down there, but it's also gets down to coaching. It gets into style of play, and I think especially at the high school level, unless you have some truly elite talent to just sit there and throw 5 out at teams, I think that the best thing that can happen is lots of movement. Everybody's moving at the same time. A focus on defense. So that's my best answer to that. I guess that's all I got. I'm going to a game tonight. I'm going to go watch a district rivalry game, Williamsville East at Williamsville North. That looks like the last regular season game of the year. There's one going on right now in Silver Creek. JFK is visiting Silver Creek. As far as I can tell, those are the last 2 regular season games of the year, and then we are strictly in postseason mode here in Western New York. So, seating meeting tomorrow. Look to the view from Center Court for Bracket Central. That'll be out. It'll be on X as soon as I got it. It'll be on theviewfromcentercourt.com. Thank you to everybody who listened. Thanks for the questions that you took the time to send in. And Frank, really missed you. Can't wait to have you back. Don't want to do it like this anymore. Yuck. Even producer Tim over there would say, you're no solo act, hon. I agree. Listen, thank you, everybody. Thanks to Empire Electric and all our sponsors. Take care.
Need an electrician? Empire Electric is your residential wiring specialist. New builds, service upgrades, lighting, generators, you name it, Empire does it with hundreds of 5-star reviews that speak for themselves. Call Empire Electric today for your free estimate.